All right. Okay, and we are live. Okay, cool. Nice. Nice. All right, it's uploading. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Quadrilogue. This is, I think, is it the fourth and kind of like last one that we're doing for this arc? I think it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those of you who joined us last week, you'll know that last week we had a conversation with Dr. Brian Brown, Taylor Barrett, who will be one of our facilitators on TMADX. We were also joined by Sam, who is one of the aspirants and a facilitator in training, mostly to kind of talk around like what is the role of facilitation insofar as developmental or transformational work is being done. And so we also thought that it would be a good idea to kind of show you guys or get to know us, which is the exec team, right? So TMX, as is being done by 5 to midnight, we're very, very lucky to have an exec team, or at least I'm very lucky to have an exec team that comprises of my beautiful partner, Ellie and Rens, who I think most of you would have met, at least these two on the Lectern Dialogue that we did with John, that went out a couple of months ago. And then most of you probably have not yet met Ricardo, who is our executive director. And so I think where we got to in that piece last week was kind of a distinction around facilitation and leadership. And I think that necessarily impacts kind of the exec team as we function. What is it to lead a team? Obviously, in a scenario where I do quite a lot of this work, I'm a facilitator by trade, and each of you have sort of been part of containers at some point or other, and now we're working together. So how does all of this work kind of transfer into getting stuff done, basically? How do we navigate things like relational dynamics, like power dynamics? How do we come together and say, okay, let's do an organizational thing? And so these are kind of things which I think we can open up over the course of the next hour and a half or so. Right. But I just want to also give you guys the opportunity to just introduce yourself to folks who probably don't know you, but will get to meet you over the course of the program anyway. So yeah, take it away, guys, and let's just take a bit of a slow roll for this conversation. I'm still sick, unfortunately. Still a little bit sniffly, a little bit under the weather. So bear with me, guys. But yeah, take it away, y'all.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rens. I trained as an actor for 3 years, and then I'm also now doing a master's in cognitive science. Tiamat feels like such a nice bridge between the two. I'm doing well today. Back in the Netherlands. I'm based in Vienna, but I'm in the Netherlands for Christmas, and I've been enjoying seeing family. Really nice to see Ricardo. Nice to see the two of you. Yeah.
Merry Christmas, everybody, by the way.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Oh, nice. I'll go next. I'm Ellie. I'm the general manager of 5 to Midnight for now. And I'm also Ethan's partner. I come from a background of dance research, and also environmental studies. Yeah, so the kind of facilitation that I've been doing before Tiamat tends to be much more in the realm of like kind of carrying conditions around arts work for freelance artists, or like dance pedagogy. How do we create more rigorous but also less harmful dance training? And I thought Tiamat really, I did have a question for all of you that I was curious about. Like, actually, there are ways in which I see us doing similar things to Tiamat before we decided to come together to do this, and what was something that was different from what you were already doing. And for me, that's I just had a question without the answer. I think what was most striking for me in Tiamat is ironically, the full bodiedness of relating, or like including the facilitation as well as the just being with someone. And I see that, or I experience that even in our like executive calls around what needs to get done for the program to start. Yeah. And today I'm feeling like suddenly very warm. Um, but also kind of like in a in between place of like end of the year. It's coming to the end of the year and then the start of a new year. Um, and like the end of a break from work, but this is also like half work. And yeah, so kind of like trying to place myself in the middle of all that. Yeah.
I love that question. Can we park it for later? Actually,
Yes.
that's good.
Sorry
Yeah.
to open something new.
Yeah, so my name is Ricardo. I studied quite a bit of time ago. I went to a small liberal arts and science university college here in the Netherlands, which is quite a popular way of multi-interdisciplinary teachings.
Sorry, Ricardo, I can't really hear you. Do you mind coming closer a little bit?
We have to do it like this.
Yeah.
Better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So I went to a small liberal arts and science university college here in the Netherlands, which is sort of a popular multi/interdisciplinary way of studying, where I studied European history and political science. Then I studied political science and aspired to become a diplomat. Tried to do that and then had a massive burnout because that's really wasn't for me. And it ended up somehow by accident in the music industry. I had a music label with two friends that we founded when we were like 17, 18 years old, that all of a sudden became rapidly rather successful. And that's where I learned everything about business entrepreneurship. Left the label not on the best terms. Learned a lot of lessons about entrepreneurship there, and also about starting a business with friends. So maybe that's something that we can talk about at some point. Which was quite interesting, but not always good, but very, very great life lessons, I would say. Then I founded an agency where we tried to help artists to remain independent. So we tried to change the music industry by helping artists to not sign 360 deals and help them within the whole field of business development, how to use data and technology to create business opportunities for yourself, marketing. But then at some point, especially during COVID, a lot of artists had a lot of mental problems. So it became sort of like a 360 deal where we also started to do some sort of coaching, which is something I always naturally gravitated towards. So I got a coaching degree, and then I went back to university. I studied psychology, learning and development, and performance psychology. And then on a very momentous day, a long time ago, a friend of mine said, "Hey, I have this sort of cyber monk friend. He's really cool. How would you like it if he would stay at your couch for like 10 days and then he would do something called Tiamat?" So I trust this friend. So I said, "Yeah, that's great." And I'm trying to do more. I try to open my house up more to people that I don't know. That was like a thing I was going through because I kind of always kind of guarded of my place. I said, "Okay, that's good." Then a week before, it's like, "Oh, by the way, all these people are coming, but they all didn't know they have to get rooms. So is it okay that we all stay in your small house?" It's like, "Yeah, I guess so." So as always, I was naturally quite busy the weeks before, and then I had one day in between. So there was one day my free. So I had like a candle night and some jazz playing in the background, and then I got a call from my friend, and he said, "Oh, I made a mistake. He's not coming tomorrow. He's already there, but his phone got stolen. Please go to the station and look for this dude." He sent me a picture. And that's how I met Ethan. So I found Ethan at the station, lost, robbed of everything except for his good spirit. And yeah, I fed him. I put him in bed, which was great. And then we did Tiamat, which was amazing. And then we went to Response together as well. And that was a whole different beast. After that, of course, I've done tier 2 in Czech Republic and tier 1 again, which was fantastic. met Rens there, for example. And then, of course, we did this amazing tier 3 where I met Ellie in Bali early this year. So that's kind of TMS journey.
Yeah, the story of how we met will never get old. It's like the one time that I lost my phone was the day that I lost it at the station when I was just about to board the train to head to Rotterdam. And then similarly, like, bless you, Jonas, thank you for introducing us. He was just like, look out for this guy. And then he sent me this picture of Ricardo. I was like, this man is frighteningly good looking. Oh my God, he actually is. And then sort of like, what? And then you also live at the Sufi Center in Rotterdam. You want to tell us a little bit about kind of like your journey through the Sufi movement? Because I know for one thing that really, just as an appreciation also, like knowing that you're embedded within a spiritual tradition or mystical tradition, I think you would be more specific, gives me a lot of security, a lot of grounding in working with you. And I think this dovetails well into kind of your question earlier of like, starting a business with friends. And I think most people consider spirituality and business to not necessarily go very well together, depending on what angle you approach it as. Some people think of it as spiritual business, do spirituality to make money. Some people consider business a spiritual endeavor. That was something I learned from my father-in-law, which really reframed it for me. And then there is kind of whatever we're in, which is also an interesting kind of balance. So I thought maybe we could move in that direction. But if that's where we like to go, I also want to hear a little bit about your involvement in the Sufi tradition.
Sure. I mean, it's quite poetic because we're in this space right now, right? It's the same space that we had tier 1 in. The very first non-actor tier 1. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think so.
Back then it was 6 days.
Really?
Yeah, tier 1 at that point was 6 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to know more about my journey, how I ended up here, or should I say a little bit about what Sufism means to me?
Let's go with the former.
Okay. I think that I was relatively young, about 22, when I was asking myself certain questions about the divine, life, existential questions. And my dad always had an inclination towards these questions too. He was always reading certain books, but more in the realm of like Eckhart Tolle and those kind of, new agey books. And then I started looking for what was available in the Netherlands, and I found there's this sort of Buddhist Dzogchen teacher, kind of similar to Sam Harris, that he teaches a type of Dzogchen, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, is devoid of any divine, of any spirituality. It's almost like a westernized version of it. His name is Jan Geurts. So I actually, 3 years, I practiced, I would say I practiced Dzogchen Buddhist practices. I wasn't a Dzogchen Buddhist, but I was trained in these meditation forms. Oh.
Yeah. So I'm shifting stuff around so we can see you more. Yeah.
Oh,
then we can do this.
No, I can only see myself this small, but that's fine. And after he sold these like year courses where you would join for 1 year and you learn certain meditation techniques. And in half a year 3, I felt there was something really off. And I think it's specifically that lack of the sacred that is kind of removed from that Buddhist teachings.
Sorry, I'm monitoring it from here, so I'm like, wait, it looks weird. I'm sorry.
And so I left midway and kind of felt very disillusioned and sort of like, I was like 24, 25 maybe. I was like, so what's next? And one of the earliest books that really impressed me is a book called, in Dutch is called Dancing Towards God. Like, I'm not sure if that's the English translation, but it's a book by Rashad Field. It's a book about Sufism, and it made a really strong impression on me. And I've also studied in Turkey. I studied religious philosophy there, which I thought was going to be mind-changing. And what I learned was reading Aquinas again. It was really I didn't like that at all. We just read Christian philosophers. I was like, oh, we're going to learn about like Ibn Arabi, and no, we didn't. But I did go to Konya and I went to Rumi's grave, and I had quite a profound experience there as well. So, but I'm not a Muslim, and I wouldn't say that I'm now, not in a traditional sense at least. So then I was like, so what's next? And then I found that I just went to Google, and I found that in Rotterdam there's this place where we are right now, which is it's a branch of what they call Indian or universal Sufism, which is a type of Sufism by an Indian mystic called Hazrat Inayat Khan, who came first to US and Europe as a musician, trying to play spiritual music for people that have no spiritual inclination whatsoever. So they didn't understand the music at all, and they thought didn't make any sense to them. They didn't understand it was always different every night. They didn't understand that it didn't have movements and applause moments. They just didn't understand it. So he would start to explain stuff around the music, and then of course Americans, being American, I love America. My girlfriend's American. I love all Americans, not all of them. They started asking him, "Can you please stop doing this music and just tell more stuff?" Almost literally. So he stopped playing music and just gave certain lectures, and then he went back to India and to his own Sufi teacher, and he said, "It's time for you to go to the West and fully embrace the mystical path." He's initiated into 4 different Sufi tariqas or Sufi orders. And he went to Europe with the message of like, you don't have to become a Muslim, but there's this mystical path of Sufism that is available to all. One of the sort of key components that landed really well in the West is this book called The Unity of Religious Ideals, which basically says that every religion, although maybe highlighting a certain aspect of it, is just another finger pointing towards the same moon. So for a lot of people, that's very welcoming, especially if you grew up Christian. You don't have to let go of that Christian roots to be accepted here. And there's Buddhists here. There's people that sort of are more atheist or come from a more new agey mystical movements. But it has all the elements of the real Sufi path. So you find a murshid, a personal teacher that is a sacred bond for life, basically. There's Sufi practices. We do zikrs, we do meditations, we do all types of gatherings. In April, I will go into the Sahara Desert for 8 days of a silent retreat with the Sufi group. So I was very much looking forward to. I guess that sort of, yeah. So I found here something, I think, which I didn't find in these more modern Dzogchen teachings of the sacred. I'm not saying that's not part of Dzogchen. I'm just saying that's how it came here in the West. Then I also felt something was missing here, and I found that in John's work. I'm just going to be very open here. So what was missing for me here, which is quite a bit, I don't want to go into that too much detail, I found in John's work. And then I've always tried to marry the two a little bit here. So I changed some of the wording of how we, especially around the communal things that we do, and more experiential things that we do, and the less talking and reading. And that's my sort of little quest.
Yeah, I felt a similar thing for coming into Tiamat and also John's stuff, that it's it brought so many things together that all made sense, and before were disparate, and like, oh, this is really cool thing here, and like experiences I've had on acid, for example, and then my experience of acting school, and then like intellectual inquiry in astronomy that I did before, and it's like, there's something in all of these that is there's some kind of through line, but I can't knit the line myself. And then John's work started doing that theoretically for me, and then going into my first Tiamat workshop, which was in the Czech Republic, where I also met you. I had this real experience of, wow, all these things are knitted together in some way, and that makes all the other disparate domains intelligible as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I can kind of like pick up on that. One is so the disparate nature of things. I used to run this entire company on my own, more or less. I had a lot of collaborators, which were great, but just in terms of holding the macro structure, it was usually just sort of me trying to do the thing. My ex-wife would help quite a lot for the most part, but it still always felt like it felt like I had to hold the disparateness. And I think we talked about this a year ago, almost 1 year ago now, because we started formulating the team after tier 3. Which is a kind of like, what is it to actually share this project at large with other people, right? And I think there were a lot of things that came out, mostly questions of, okay, how much does it actually change what we're doing? How do we hone this well, such that, it doesn't reduce kind of the complexity of all the things we're trying to tie together. And also, how does it not become just like a money-making endeavor where we're trying to just sort of maximize the profit and then go in that direction, which is something that at least Ricardo and I had spent a lot of time talking about. And I had never really considered it that way. For those of you who know my work from very early on, I was running things on like a pay-as-you-wish kind of basis for a very, very long time, because I was working more in sort of like the cultural sphere, where there's very little money, at least here, there's very little money to support this work, particularly when it's not explicitly oriented towards making artistic products or productions. And for a long time, I felt very attached to the idea of doing that and attached to the idea of being an artist, that it was very difficult to step away. And because it was difficult to step away, I wasn't quite sure what it would afford me, right? So talk about like a transformational shift. I'm like, what happens if I don't identify as an artist completely? What actually opens up? And that's the space that opened up was actually for the science to come in, for the philosophy to come in. Thanks for naming Aquinas. I got to know Aquinas through Nishitani, actually. And also that helped bring me into deeper conversation with other fields, even in performance, right? Like dancers as well. And those all sort of got folded in. And I think that's kind of like a running theme of at least how I see us working. And when we're trying to create a project for people to kind of go through, or a process to go through, actually, is somewhere between project and process. But the extent to which we can fold more and more in feels to me quite present. I know we've talked about this last week in our exec meeting as we're moving into the new year. I, for one, was very surprised at actually how much the relational was folded into our meeting. So it's not professional distance. Now you guys have moved from participants to being, members of the team, right? But we're going to keep a distance. It's actually still very close. And something I think I named, but one of you named as well. But it was very present for me, which was actually folding in the relational pieces, like what's actually happening with each other in our development, moves so much of the executive work forward that it clears kind of like long-term problems to my mind. And so I just kind of want to open that up, that it's not just about the connection of ideas or disciplines or research, but it's actually a much more lived in. So I want to sort of offer that. I'm also aware that we're holding your question from earlier. Is there a place for that here now? I can't quite remember the content because I'm a bit woozy.
I do feel woozy too, but I think it's the lights or something. Anyway, coming back, I don't feel like that question is so salient, but it can be folded into my current thing that I want to share and ask about, which is the thing that you mentioned about how the relational helps the executive work move faster. I think it's most like a clear example of that is that we bring forward things that we're not sure about instead of assuming or trying to guess what our role is, and therefore we should play or certain things. Like we just bring it forward, and we know that if in the case that someone can't do it or can't do a certain task, there's no bad blood at all. And if no one can do it, we will find a way to find a different solution so that it works for the company. Like we're oriented towards the goodness of the company rather than like the shoulds or like the purity codes that at least for me are quite present in other work contexts. And I thought like tier 3 was quite on like an intense lab to work that out, to what it actually means in a collective to bring forward something that has some kind of stake, or like if what the thing that happened was like someone had a desire and everyone was like, oh, but it's kind of late, we want to go and rest, and then trying to regroup around like, okay, what does it mean that someone has a strong desire, and what are the stakes of readjusting our wants and desires to that. And then based on that, then my question is, since you've been running this company for so many years alone, what brought up the idea of like, oh, maybe I want to get a team to do this together in the first place?
Well, it's not that far off from what you just named, Bao, because it's like I remember that but that particular incident with the tier 3 was, the shift was, this person has made a request to take a risk which he had been stepping back from for most of the container, right? So there is something of it being a real leaning into a particular edge, which is, so the thing that we're kind of orienting towards is not just, okay, does this person want this now? I got to put whatever I want to do down, right? It's not that, but it's looking at it in terms of the developmental context. Wow, this means something to this person because there is a way in which she was pretty back-footed for a long time, and so to really voice that and to say like, I have a real desire to do this,
That's a big step.
It was a huge step, and it was coming forward with like, this is the thing I care about, and it's very different from, I suppose it was more, it was something that wasn't maybe that much of a move, or wasn't that much of a risk for that person to take. It would probably land very differently. But I think that's something that speaks a little bit to like why I want to kind of distribute, authority is not the right word, but like distribute leadership of the company to you guys and for us to do that. Because when I'm running the thing by myself as an entrepreneur, and I'm wondering if you know how to speak to this a little bit more, Ricardo, but like I felt there was a way in which I wasn't growing because I can't be the mirror to my own blind spots. Right? And all of you, you probably the most because we live together, right? I like have been really very astute and very sharp at just being able to question, hang on, why are we doing this, Ethan? Like, why are you suggesting this? What about this gap? What about this gap? And that has grown a lot of, not just the ecology, not just Tiamat as a whole. As Ricardo said, it was 6 days. Now it's down to 3 days not because we removed stuff, but because there were a lot of things that I didn't know how to do well enough, fast enough, that actually there was a lot of bloat in that 6 days, that now is actually much more condensed and refined. And that means that people like Rens could experience it in a different way by the time you got around to doing it, by the time you got around to doing it. So I think that's sort of the answer to the question, which is I felt like under my own leadership, the company wasn't growing and I wasn't growing either, developmentally speaking, not just in terms of finances. So yeah, I think that's a really lovely question. Yeah, that's what I would say, I think. What?
That's just a nice end. What was I saying? I was thinking the other day, I was, in organizational psychology, there's this like theory of forming, storming, norming, performing. Have you ever heard this?
What? Yeah. Forming, norming, storming, conforming.
it's just this idea of new teams form. There's a sort of phase where everyone is just kind of nice to each other. Nothing really happens. Productivity is very low, but everything seems really friendly. Everyone is just kind of just testing the waters. That's the forming phase. And forming easily becomes storming when people start to annoy the shit out of each other. And then it becomes storming, and there's a lot of distrust because they're like, oh, yeah, no, I see the real you. And oh, he's done this once, or she's done this once, blah, blah. Right? And then, of course, that has to go into a phase of norming where actually norms supported by the group sort of form itself, and people you kind of get an idea of like, oh, this is what Rens could do, this is what, right? We really trust starts to build, and then from that you go into a performing phase. That's where every team needs to be. And part of this theory says that the storming phase is one of the most important and critical ones, if not the most critical ones. And there are actually companies that never get there, so they just always stay in this sort of like, hey, how are you doing, and they just touch the surface. That's it. But I actually was teaching about this a few weeks ago, and I was thinking there is something in how we do things, which is probably just a testament of like what we've gone through together as well, or just the fact that we've all been through TMED and other personal development work and on our own journeys, that there is, that I think besides the forming, because I never thought we had a long forming phase where we were all just very nice to each other. Okay, we could skip that because I think that's a very non-ideal state because nothing really happens there. There is this, but we can unpack this maybe if you want. There is this, I have a feeling that we can exist somewhere where these all speak to each other at the same time. It's not like phases. We can just have like storming can exist at the same time as performing and norming, and everything happens simultaneously as a sort of continuous relational process, instead of it sort of like how they say it, like, oh, it's like very like sequential, and then sometimes there's a drop back, especially when new team members drop. No, I think that actually real progress, both individually and from the group, comes from living on that space where everything is possible, and that can only exist when the storming never becomes hostile or projection. It just becomes like, oh, there's like things happening, there's tensions, there's like relational black holes.
Yeah.
And then from there, easily also they transform in something genuine and something quite powerful. Let's unpack that.
Sorry, Rens, do you want to say something? Because I see you breathing. I think I've learned to associate that Rens takes a breath and he's going to drop some bombs. But I want to make sure that, because I have something, but if you want to go, please, by all means.
No, you go.
Okay. Because I think, Ricardo, you sort of like naming this framework. I agree with you also, by the way, that I think all of those are happening at all different levels at the same time. Especially because people join in all the time. New people join in all the time. So somebody's always forming something. There's a way in which, I don't even like to use the language, but storming in a way for me has always spoken to whatever is implicit, right, that isn't actually dealt with or addressed at the time that it might need to be. And it's just a lot of things hitting critical mass at the same time. But this has always been kind of something on my consideration that I always have in sort of like my rear view mirror, which is knowing that the context in which I've met you guys, probably with the exception of you because it's Bumble, is as a participant in a container which I'm leading, right? So when we transition into something a bit more like this and you have to actually get work done, I know that I don't want to be in a leadership position, like not in that sense, like I'm not a teacher in our meetings, right? But being in this world or doing this work, there's a way in which I kind of look at it going, wait, are you all at the same place? Like, do you all still see me as a kind of teacher? Is there a way in which I need to help with that? Or is it wrestling? Is it creating some kind of, this is what I mean by implicit, right? Is it creating a kind of dynamic where actually, it's difficult to push back on something that I say, or a suggestion that I name, which for the most part, I think we dealt with very early on, but now we've sort of come to a different, see now is a norming thing. But it seems to have become resolved. I've noticed, and I say this in appreciation of you guys, like you're pushed back a lot more now. But I'm wondering what is the process of doing that? How did you all negotiate that? Is it something that you all did have to negotiate? And how did you all come through that, I suppose?
I mean, I think for me personally, I think that even when doing TMED, even when you facilitated, we had a lot of clashes. That's one of the things that we do, whether it's in the container, in the car ride back from Czech to Prague. Remember?
Yeah.
You were there too, right?
Yeah, I was there.
So I think
What,
that
I
you
was,
and I.
what happened?
This is a couple of years ago, in fact.
I don't even remember what happened. It was just like it's like a big contraction, right? And also in the container, like right, and I've always tried to call out Ethan's bullshit, but of course there's also a lot of my own bullshit is in there, and sometimes that clashes, and sometimes maybe it doesn't actually it is bullshit, but then Ethan doesn't want to see it at that moment or anything that can happen, right? Like there's a lot of things happening because these are very dynamic containers as well.
Well, there was a lot of mine in there too. It was you weren't picking up wrong things. You weren't picking up things that weren't there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's a bit of that I'm not a very agreeable person, so that helps. We already had that dynamic that I felt safe in, and also didn't feel very comfortable here to be not necessarily to be clashing all the time, but just to be able to express that. And I hope that because whether or not I called out things that were rightfully called out, that might be true, but the way I did it wasn't always very tactful, so to speak, or even useful, right? I think you've pointed out a lot of times that I was really good at like dropping like objects. Remember? And I hope that that's a path that I've been walking, is that the clashes are still there, because I think there's nothing wrong with them, but that I've become a little bit more tactful, or at least more genuine, or able to express more from an I perspective, instead of being like, oh, by the way, I noticed this thing, let's drop it as a little. Let's see what happens there. So that I think helped. That's if we look at norming, having an explicit agreement with you, or almost an instruction that I think was supported, helped by both, of like, you hold the pedagogy pool, but I hold the business pool, and those sometimes clash very heavy. And that's also much about us as much as that it's like, okay, we cannot, right? So as an example that people can understand is like, yeah, if Ethan feels that tier 3 actually needs to be 15 days, because then that's the best way to actually go through this. And I'm like, yo, no one has 15 days to take off. That's just impossible. Like, how are we going to sell that? I mean, that's the clash that we have to have our organization. So this helped. Maybe even the first tier 1 helped a little bit, in the sense that the one that we did here, because we spent every night together evaluating, and I think it had to do a little bit with the fact that I felt very protective of the space. All of a sudden, I realized, oh shit, there's actually quite a sacred space for me, and we have to be kind of careful with what we do with that here, especially in the other room. I think that was also my own sort of bullshitting mechanism of kind of not being fully in, right? Like, I always had this little way out, being like, oh yeah, but it's like the space, looking at the space, right? So there was a bit of bullshit for me there as well, but it also, I think, it started for me as a way in which I felt like we could see each other the truth. Also outside, in the container, outside the container, in the containers in Czech Republic, when we go to clashes, and now as well. So I think it's a combination of my personality, what we've created as a whole, where I feel very safe to do that, even though it sometimes can be quite intense. And also the explicit agreement of, hey, let's have different pools and see where we end up. It's also helped me.
Yeah.
You're breathing again.
I'm breathing again. Yeah, I'm breathing. I'm trying to get this thought out. Yeah, I think my relationship with you, Ethan, has been like it was initially, it was this experience of meeting this person who has this like multi-dimensional like, it's not like you could just give me your thoughts, but you could also give me your feelings in such high detail, and fluency, and then you could also hold mine in with such care and space, and allow me to express my own thing, and afforded me as well expressing myself in this high dimensional um, um, way. And that was at first so um, enthralling and almost like intoxicating, and and then it became this um, like almost a chase for your approval that I engaged in. And then that and then that was in all sorts of contexts, like as a facilitator's assistant, and then also as your assistant, your logistical assistant, and now I'm the company assistant. Um, and and I feel like it's been shifting, especially recently, into okay, how can I hold more of my own in this relationship with you, and then, but at the same time, that the fluency you have with that dance is still so much higher than the fluency I have. So it's like, wow, it's a bit like almost overwhelming for me to hold that pole myself, especially because I'm such an agreeable person. I don't have the luxury of your disagreeability. um, but I'd agree that putting that formal structure down of I'm in charge of logistics and admin, and you and all of you fully giving that to me, um, I think enabled me to do that at least organizationally. Like I felt fully in charge and um, a leader in that role, and afforded me pushing back on stuff, going, hey, wait, this isn't gonna work. If you two have this differing wants, this I can see the logistical impossibility of that. Like, guys, let's figure this out, and I can, in full confidence and competence, can lay that out and hold that pole and contribute in this way, which is, yeah.
Oh, 100%. And I just also, just so everyone who is watching this and listening, like all the beautiful like locations that we're going to be going to at TMNX. You know, I know you worked with Ricardo for the in securing the Universal Sufi Temple, right? That we're going to be going to. But it's like, you know, you took full charge of that and ran with that. And it's because of that you handle negotiations, and you're going to email people, and you want to have to talk to people who, you know, in different languages mostly, right? To be able to build this for us. So, you know, thank you. And I say that because I think you're pointing at something which is very important, that the leadership is distributed. I can hold kind of a bit like what Ricardo was saying. I can hold the pedagogical pole, right? And I go, okay, well, what's going to be good for the program? You know, but everybody else also holds a different piece. So I just wanted to name that in appreciation of you, bro. Yeah, sorry, my love. And did you want to weigh in on this? Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Hold on.
Appreciation of that, because you say this thing about the blessing of the non-agreeableness, which of course is also equally occurs sometimes. But I actually noticed quite strongly in recent weeks how we have quite a few big decisions to make, right? So we're currently talking about maybe expanding the exec team. That's a big thing. And I think there have been moments where you know, you can say it's like Ethan went really quickly because he really wanted that. It became a bit chaotic, and I tried to really put my foot down there. But I remember several times where then you came sort of with an afterthought of like, hey, well, I'm kind of, yeah, here with Ricardo, do we not need to do this and this? And I was like, fuck, man, I wish I said it like that.
You know that, thanks, man.
Yeah. It's like, oh, shit, I wish I said it like that. That's what I meant. Why did I say the other? No, I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, for me, I think something that I've learned quite significantly over the past year is just like being comfortable, how to be comfortable being uncomfortable in like really complex relational dynamics. So even just this thing of like, oh, when Ethan says something, I can push back. and not just from a place of defensiveness, but from a place of like, I know things, like, and it's helpful for me to bring it forward. And this happens on the level of like the exec team, of facilitator in training in our Spire calls, and in our relationship.
And also how I might not be in the state to be making any decisions at a particular point in time.
Yeah. But I think something that's the difficult thing for me to overcome is that there's a part that's completely mine that kind of wishes that someone would just tell me what to do, and I just follow. And when I don't get that instruction, that's actually like out of my worldview. Like that's what I used to know my place in the world is, as a dancer, as a student, and
that's what I push back on with you.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's not like it took a lot of time to just get through the confusion of like, wait, where's my instruction? Oh, I don't have one. Okay, I need to think of something to do. Where does that come from? And then going to the level of like, okay, what about not just me but us, and that's also what I kind of see myself doing within the exec team, or often looking for what's not being said or not being done, even on like from things as small as like organizing our Google Drive to like when we are talking about really difficult decisions, or just like really like complicated administrative steps. Like what's the most efficient way forward, or what's the simplest way that we can summarize this that can help us to kind of like regroup and then like not get too stuck in the relational or like executive black holes.
Because it can go either way.
Yeah.
It can very much fall into like, okay, let's just find the most efficient way of doing this, the most productive thing, or let's just figure out how you feel, right? Or how anybody else feels. And sometimes we get locked in a contraction. And at least for me, right, and I think, we've spoken kind of a little bit about more or less or like the way in which we work, which is everything that we've all talked about, whether it's sort of like distributing ownership and leadership around to each sort of person's zone of responsibility, right? And working out the dynamics of that. Most of our meetings are that, with some toilet humor, mostly from me. But then I think where I found a place to really kind of like hang my coat on, and ultimately what matters most is the extent to which it will impact a participant's experience. So, how are you guys sort of seeing the move from making decisions in a relational fashion, right? Taking into consideration what we each care about, where we might have our hang-ups, where we might have our resistances or our crunchiness. How does that interact with knowing that we're doing stuff that is not actually ultimately for ourselves? We're trying to create an experience for other people to be able to step into and hopefully grow into. How do you guys orient to that? Because to me, that's where I naturally go. So I might not necessarily know how you guys might have to wrestle with that way, or if it is the default to you too. So what's that for you guys?
I mean, because I've been working as a teacher for quite a few years, so in that sense, the orientation is very similar. But I think in the past, I was much more caretaky, in the sense of like, just don't harm people, like don't ask for consent, make sure everyone's safe, and like, that. In fact, I sometimes I do have this value, which is like, it won't kill you. Like, no one would die because they don't get to dance. Okay, so like, get your priorities right. That someone's a person before they are a dancer. So that should happen that should play out in your pedagogy as well. So what I'm learning in this process is kind of unlearning the caretakiness a little bit. Like, okay, yes, safety is important, but at what point does safety become a hindrance to learning or to growth? and then how to balance that.
Mm.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're watching this and you have questions for us, also please feel free to drop into the chat. We can see it on this side, so we can always bring that in. Sorry to cut you off, guys, but just want to name that.
Well, it's actually funny that you mentioned exactly this, because I forgot to mention that earlier when you said that process is sort of like, how can we speak the truth to each other? I think something really important happened for me when a few weeks ago we had quite an intense. I don't actually know exactly.
Sorry, can you lean in, bro, a little bit? Yeah.
But okay, so a few weeks ago we had this, or 2 months ago maybe, we had this bigger clash, and then we had the weekly call that we had, or we had an extra scheduled call, I guess, or we also called on the phone, and you showed then, or you said something that I could see from your entire being, how much this matters to you, right? And how much the responsibility you feel, and not the sort of responsibility of like, oh, it's the Manhattan project, but the responsibility of like, oh, there's actually going to be people there in the room with us, right? And this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
And I felt that so deeply when you said that, and I think I've always sort of projected, or not, that you also are very protective because it's your little baby, your company. And I kind of want to always like kind of poke at that, because I'm like, yo, we're more than us now. And then I realized like, okay, part of that may be there. And I have a question. I would like to hear more about that later, how that is for you, actually, other people poking at your baby. But at that moment, I realized like, oh, much more of that is your feeling of responsibility for the participants and how much you care about that, which actually made me feel safe to not care that much about that in the way that you do, because I know that you do that. And it gave me the freedom to care about it, not that we do this retreat very well, but that we do retreats for many years, right? So I can hold the pole of caring about how do we make this in a business decision and a financial decision, so that we can actually keep doing this for in the long run, so that there's participants also in 5, 10, and 20 years, or something even bigger that we cannot even foresee right now, based on how you hold that pole for this specific container, or an individual container.
Yeah.
Can I add one? Yeah. And I was also happy because that was a quite an important moment for me, because I think after you showed how much that responsibility affected you in a good way, I think I was able to show you, which I'm not very good at, because I normally speak about what I feel, but I was able to be in that feeling of like, yo, I feel a similar responsibility, right? I also feel like we have people showing up, and this is a pricey program, and I want to build something. And I think I showed that back, and you realize like, I think this is a projection that you've also got like, oh wait, I'm not alone. Also in that responsibility, you know.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my in my role as the logistics guy, it feels one step removed from the actual participants in a way. It's like I trust you and the rest of the Spire facilitation team, and I'm in Spire as well, so that's in that way I can step more into the care and concern for the participants. But as the logistics guy, it feels like I'm doing the support that enables all of that to happen, and almost like I'm in service to the three of you and the rest of the Spire cohort, as you guys as people, to like show up and do the best that you possibly can in the actual container, and the thought of being an agent that contributes to that thing being possible, that's the reward in it for me.
Yeah, there's something interesting kind of what both you are saying, which is sort of dovetailing around a single thread, which has to do with like and maybe I learned this more tacitly, but for better or for worse, I care very deeply about things. Even the smallest things. Like they go through me like into a certain depth. And if it doesn't, I push it there, right? I always try to figure out like, okay, why do I care about this so much? And I try and hold it, within a particular kind of philosophical framework. But I trust that if I do that and I can show up with why this matters to me so much, that it actually frees up whoever else I'm in conversation with to more take their particular perspective on it. So the short form of that is something like, if I show you how I'm caring about something, then you don't have to care about how you think I'm caring about this thing, right? That there is a way in which we can both sort of come together, I suppose, clash it out or find a middle way between the two of them. Because I'm for sure, just because I care about something deeply doesn't mean I know everything about it. I know what I know within that locus of what I deem to be important. But like Ricardo, you named this thing of sort of like more long-term planning, right? I've been doing this for 10 years, but the mentality has always been, how do I do the next workshop? When am I going to do the next one, right? As opposed to you're going, how do we do this for another 20 years, right? Into 2050 and beyond. I'm not even thinking that far, bro. I'm thinking like March, now June, right? But my vision is very narrow in that sense. Having said that, though, it's like that vision being narrow means that there are some good trade-offs, which is what is the depth of the experience that you're getting at that particular time, at that particular place, with a particular group of people that will really offer the most there. And I don't see your considerations and my considerations as separate. Because if you're not holding that piece of how do we do this in the long term, then I'm not actually considering how much time I have to wrestle with a particular question. Right? And I think there's a way in which that can sometimes collapse me, where I feel like, no, it has to be done like correct right now, and I don't give myself, you all know this, I don't give myself the opportunity or the space to make a mistake that I might actually need to make in order to help me learn something better the next time around. Because in a lot of ways, running the company alone means whatever, if something goes wrong, I have to deal with it myself, and it's only my responsibility, as opposed to being able to share that and put our heads together and go, okay, how do we hold this together? In that sense, I've been really bad at asking for help. And that's probably a lot of the reason why for so many years, the company has been, just basically me running the thing. And so to speak to your question, which you poked me about, Ricardo, around sort of like the attachment to, the company being a certain way, or 5 to Midnight being a certain way, or me leading the team. I mean, I gave that up a long time ago, which is why one of the decisions that I had brought to the team very early on was like, we need to have an executive director and an artistic director. I'll be the artistic director, as I have been, because I'm ambitious. I grow shit, right? And they will grow very fast. But I need an executive director on hand to be able to tell me like, okay, but that's probably not going to last past March. Right? Like the idea, you're not seeing that pull. So then I'm not the one with sole, I suppose, leadership authority. There's always a balance. There has to be a trade-off. And then we were working also with like the general manager being able to go like, nice. Also, how are we doing that? Right? Like, what does it sort of like look like on the ground and on the paper in a way that keeps it above board? So there are multiple checks and balances on that front, which I wouldn't be able to do. So as far as I'm concerned, I think like I've been able to put that attachment down, but now I'm more attached to us working as a team, and I'm more attached to this larger structure that's forming. Because, even in the, like, say, the decisions that we're making now of like, hey, do we add someone to the exec team. Like, I feel a lot of attachment to, you know, the ways in which we've been working so far, and I'm like, oh, okay, is it gonna, you know, do we have to fold somebody in and do that? You know, some young part of me doesn't want to let go of the safety that I feel with you guys in being able to run something like this. But I also know that I had to make a similar move something like 8-9 months ago, which I can reasonably make again, right? And it's just more of that growing, but that's more of my piece. So that's what I would say. I know we were supposed to hold this question to the next exec meeting, but you know, since you ask it, I offer it to you, Vamildert. Yeah, how do you guys feel about sort of like how this has changed, I suppose, maybe your experience of working in a team or as a team, and the kind of work that we're doing? How does that sort of shift something for you? Because you guys have been doing it in multiple different aspects as well, I'm sure.
How does what shift those other contexts?
You're right. I should clarify my question, my love. It's something like how does the practice of doing TMAT actually change the way in which you show up in like an organizational, like working as a team sort of setting? How does that differ from other experiences that you have had in the past, you know, of working on a non-profit or in a production or running a business? Things like that. Is that clear enough?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think a major one is the generic past experience in other contexts I've had is that there's a box, and then there's like things that fit in the box where like this is part of your role, this is like an acceptable thing to bring into the rehearsal studio or the professional context that we're in, and these are other things that are not acceptable to be brought into this box. And then if one of those pop up, then okay, we need to like figure out a way how to like, elegantly and as quickly as possible just cover it up and keep going, and then maybe someone else will talk to that person later outside the context. And that's not at all been my experience here. And I think this is the efficiency piece that you guys were talking about earlier, where somehow that the skill and shared language and shared practice that we all have with what was that? Okay. Because of Tiamat, it was like a gunshot.
No, it was fireworks.
Fireworks. Ah, cool.
Oh, yeah. Fireworks. Oh, okay.
New Year's.
not far off.
No. Yeah, but because of this shared language of practice that we have with Tiamat, that affords us actually, when one of these things come up, then we can actually just deal with it in the box. We just expand the box a little bit. Or maybe there is no box. This metaphor is losing its legs, but we can deal with whatever comes up and fold that in to the project that we're engaged in, so that it's not that any of us have to hold something and be in this awkward position while we trudge along for the sake of the project.
Yeah. I think that's the profundity, that there is no box.
Yeah, I mean, for like the how radical it is to not have a should, you know, in all the contexts that we are in, whether it's like relational or like doing stuff. I realize that, like, because I'm always looking for a should, and then just being able to name why I think that should might be there. Like, oh, I'm worried that, you know, I'll get judged for doing something wrong, or like sounding too, you know, just being disliked because I'm not, you know, nice enough or something like that. And then, but then still parsing that out from the genuine kind of question that I have about the thing that we are doing, and then just clearing that up. I think that's something that I'm learning to do even in my other work context. And another thing is listening for what's the underlying kind of desire sometimes. Like everyone's kind of talking around a certain thing. Oh, but it might be better if we do it a certain other way. Oh, but the problem with that might be blah, blah, blah. And in kind of with the context that I have of their backgrounds and like the ways in which they're bringing it forward, there's a way in which I can ask certain questions to be like, is this what you want? Is this what we want? And then people can then be like, oh yeah, that's it. Or like, no, not at all. What I mean is something else. And sometimes that's kind of useful, but it's not like a one-trick pony. It's just a new way that I know how to be compared to in the past. Yeah.
Well, there's also added complications because we're partners as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I name this in the sense of there's an intimacy to that, right? So because there isn't a way of professional distance, and I stamp that out very quickly, I always get the sense that when I name something as a suggestion, or when I'm making a move for something, that I also get the sense that you know why that's important to me, almost in the same vein that Ricardo was naming earlier. And I think like bringing that in is also important because let's use Ricardo as an example, right? You have a relationship with the Sufi tradition that is multi-years long, that predates our friendship, right? So when you name that, hey, we can do this at the Universal Sufi Temple, the way I hear it is not, oh, here's a venue, right? It's like the way I hold it is like, wow, like there is a kind of like wow, and I don't take it lightly. I take it seriously because these are people, whether they'll be there or not, but it's a tradition, it's a venue and a space that is of deep importance to your development, right? And so it's not something that I hold lightly insofar as like it's a financial decision whether or not we should go with this option A or option B. And that if we go with that space and we have that, I take it as you trust us, like the company, but you also trust me with something that really matters to you. And to me, I don't really see another way of doing business or doing organizations. I've been in far too many scenarios where the most convenient option was the one we went with because it was lower risk. But lower risk also means lower care, lower significance. And to me, I don't want that. Because it doesn't transform the way in which I participate in the decision making of that particular thing. I can't take it seriously if it doesn't matter to you. And it's the same thing with like say Adela helping us to find spaces in Czech. Adela is a close friend, and I know how she works. That she really goes to the place, like sorts it out, talks to the person, sits down, has a tea with them or a coffee or a dinner. Really puts in a lot of effort to get to know the person and why they have made a particular space in a particular way. And she texts me about that, like she'll share that to me, and I'm like, yeah, okay. Now I can care about it the same way that you do. And I think that goes for each other, but also in like broadly our partners or people we choose to engage with. So I really hear kind of what you're naming is you've done so much work on care studies. Like how do you enact that in the decision-making process has been revolutionary for the way that I think about how we do organizations and business and making stuff happen. Yeah. So that was very juicy, so I want to jump in on that because I think it's really important. Yeah.
Because context. So I didn't share this, but I also have another sort of day job where I am a co-owner of a. Oh my god! I mentioned this before. But I'm also in my latest entrepreneurial endeavor is a generative AI music project that I don't want to go into right now. But in September, when we raised a significant amount of money, we could expand our team. I thought it was a great idea to ask my girlfriend, who's an artist, to join for visual designs and stuff. And that has been beautiful, but also has been very, very, very challenging for us in many ways. How is that for you? We never talked about this actually, but how is it to be partners romantically and also work together?
That's a very brilliant and unexpected question. That's not where I thought you were going, but well, okay. I mean, in terms of the work, actually has been really like talking to you about work has been how to say it? Like I feel like we both like working a bit too much.
Oh yeah.
So the trade-off is that we get really hooked onto or attached to like talking about different kind of work related stuff, and then there's a part of me that's like, oh my god, why am I like feeling kind of so tired and like cooped up in this apartment for so long? We haven't had like a date in 2 weeks or something like that, or it's I mean, my sense is the work is fine. Like we don't really argue. Not now. In the earlier days, like the beginning part of the year,
before the Euro tour, a lot. Yeah, definitely.
Because and that was because I was bringing things about work, about the four of us, to him, but not to you two. So he was like, why are you telling me? This is not something that I have answers to or whatever. Like, this is not mine to do. Ask them. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And after certain norms that we have developed between us, then that just kind of fell out of sailing.
Well, hang on. So there's something important to touch on here, because I think what you're naming is it's coming up to me really as like I trust Ricardo and I trust Rens. And I also at that point knew these two gentlemen for much longer than you have, right? So there is a way in which I was holding this thing of like, no, I think they can handle it, right? But what I definitely didn't want was to keep the implicit where you might not know how to handle a situation, but then because of the proximity and the amount of time that we spent, and of course the anxiety with which you're holding some of these really big questions at the time when we're planning to be away from home for what was ultimately 6 months to do this crazy thing, that you were bringing it to me in hopes that I could service something of a decision. To my understanding was that I could offer something that would relieve some of that pressure. Is that right?
Yes, in the sense that it's the executive and the emotional that's blended together, right? Like, I want some comfort in terms of answering this particular problem that we have at work. It's like, wait, are you looking for a solution, or are you looking for, and at that point I didn't really know. I couldn't really tell.
But you got so much better at the process of parsing those two out, because no executive decision is emotionally neutral. No decision we have to make is emotionally neutral, right? It is, especially if we care about it and we go like, oh, there's pressure around this decision. But you got really much better at being able to sort of like parse those out in a way that's not cold and reductive, and then going, oh, you know what? Let me have a call with Rens to talk about it. Okay, Ricardo and I have a call for an hour to sort out, the company legal stuff and do all that sort of stuff, which was really great, because that's exactly the kind of space that I needed to be able to really hear you when you say, babe, do you want to go out and have dinner, or should we go and get a massage for this weekend, right? Because otherwise I'm sitting there thinking like, we gotta make this thing, we gotta do this, and we gotta go into this meeting, so and you plan this stuff out, and then if you're talking about it, then everything sort of gets like bogged down and difficult. So to answer your question, Ricardo, I think it has been like a learning process, I think, for the two of us also,
We're still learning.
We're still learning. It's still tough. And I think it's not to say that the difficulty of the decisions is continually escalating. It's more the complexity of them. As we move into kind of like different kinds of projects, TMedX is a very different beast, right? It runs 8 months. It's not just planning a series of atomic containers. How do we hold a relationship with, at this point, what is like, 15, 20 people, in a space, including facilitators, right? Including folks like John and Taylor, right? Where there's so much more complexity on that front. And to do that well, to do that wisely, we have to figure that out. But at least I think we have a strong enough foundation. And really also deeply, I never get the sense that you're just trying to get work done through me. You actually really care about the extent to which I push myself to do stuff. And the opposite is also true. Like you asked me, how sustainable is the amount of work that you're taking on? And I wrestle with that question damn long. I'm brought to you guys. You guys also know that as well. I work very hard for this. So yeah, how's that as an answer, Ricardo? What does that call up for you?
No, it's beautiful. It's nice to hear this because we never talked about this as a group also, because it never came up. It wasn't something that I shied away from. Yeah, in a way it's similar. I think the process with my girlfriend is very tricky, I think, because she is running into a few things of herself in the work. It's like a kind of like a first, that's not a first, it's like it's a job that she cares about, but also some things like she runs into a lot that's actually takes more time than I thought or something. And I'm actually supervising her on this. Sometimes I need the deadline, she misses the deadline, so she sees that. It could be very sad. And then I need to always switch between, okay, now I can care for her as a boyfriend, but I also have a problem now. How can I balance this? It was a really balancing act, but it's quite a, I think in a sense, if you can do this well, which I think we're doing, in the beginning it's very disruptive, but then now that we're finding each other, you see another side of each other, and that grows as well, and that also for us it has brought us a lot of love. Has it brought you more love for each other?
More. Yeah, for sure. I think, it feels quite clear and I can speak maybe for both of us, that we are called to this work, right? Like relational work is something that we definitely have been doing and want to keep doing for a long time. In orienting to that, kind of new things come up in the ways that we grow, that when I see Ethan, like, I'm like, wow, you're so cool. And then you keep self-correcting and changing. And then I look at myself and I'm like, wow, some parts I feel really shit about myself. But then then he's like, wait, there's this other thing you're not looking at. And I'm like, oh, actually, I'm cool too. And that's one thing that I wanted to add about the self-correction. I think that's something generally I would say you're much more well practiced in that than I am. So when I hear you talking about the supervision and stuff like that, there hasn't been much occasion between the four of us that I brought something and you're like, anyone has been like, oh, that's really we can't use this, we gotta fix a lot of stuff. But say in our relationship, there's been times where I've kind of, with my own kind of baggage and stuff, projected pretty hard, and then realized that's me, that's not Ethan. And then having to self-correct in that state is I'm still working on it. It's still really hard. I can do it on reflection, hey, I'm sorry I said that. But in the moment, I'm like, literally. Just not saying anything. Whereas Ethan brings stuff to me actively, with the pedagogy of Tiamat, right? Hey, I want to rejig or have a new idea for this exercise, and he does this with Rens, and we did it in check-in with Adela as well. Let's try this out. Does it work? How you feeling. That's something that I feel like I need to learn more of how to do, like let
Yeah.
go of a little bit.
Well, you're speaking to something which I think most people don't really necessarily know just by looking at the website, which is that we all hold multiple roles of things, right? Like everybody here is a facilitator.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, like that's also where part of where we are, right? Just like we're partners, but we're also business partners, but we're also friends, and I think separating those out is detrimental because then it's like, oh, that means from this time to this time, I have to look at you in this particular way only as if the rest of them don't exist. And to me, that's a misnomer because I know, like, for you, I'm constantly amazed at like the amount of research that you can do, not just on executive things that we need to do, right? Like you've gone through like the whole like legal framework, right, for how this works across multiple countries, such that we are all sort of like bureaucratically safe. But I also know you to be able to transfer that same gumption and that kind of enthusiasm into creating an exercise. And you're a practice researcher. So I like this. There's a lot of ways in which I feel the multiple roles that you play, and this goes for all of you as well. So like come together and land very well to what it is that we're trying to do. And I think it's the same thing for when we add eventually, folks to the exec team, that we're not just hiring somebody to come in and do something. There are everybody who is here, whether they are aspirants or someone joins the exec team or someone who is advising us, consulting for us, is like a full-bodied person with all of their disciplines and all of their experience. And I try at least to model. I mean, I appreciate what you're appreciating. I feel that. And that is also a journey for me to go, okay, how do I not just look at this one person for this one particular thing, because they're not a service. They're a human being. Each person's a human being. And I think that's sort of like where I'm at. I'm getting very like romantic in a lot of ways about this, because I think what you all have done is shown me the potential of how wide-reaching the work can be. And I've seen it in the experience of participants who have come, especially in this Euro tour. Just having you guys in the room, I've seen the ways in which you all have interacted with participants and treated them with a lot of grace. That for me, I'm like, wow, yeah, people are good. Like, you're just good. And I think the participants benefit from that far more than in previous years where it was just me trying to do stuff. I can't imagine another way of doing this work at all. Yeah.
I have a question.
You also have 8 minutes to ask it, 7 minutes.
I think it would be a good question to close with, because I've heard also like the aspirants ask this question, or at least like enough people have brought it up to me that I think it's important to talk about. How do you tell your friends about what you're doing with 5 to Midnight? How do you explain that? Or
Or how have you tried?
Yes.
Some of them have done it, which has been a great affordance in my friendship with them. I have 2 good friends who've tried it. And then with other friends, especially new friends that I'm meeting now a lot in this new city that I'm in, moved to 3 months ago. I've been giving them theoretical frameworks mostly, like the DIME framework. Yeah, we do these practices, and then I explain what the practices look like, and that's normally how I start it. And then sometimes there's fascination, sometimes there's not much interest, and then I take it from there. I've done every now and then there's enough curiosity where I say, okay, we can try a practice, and usually it's like a little AR game, and then they go, "Whoa, this is crazy!" And I go, "Yeah." Yeah.
So with the exception of
Yeah.
of my few friends who I think would actually fit well in joining a container, which I actually have explained it, and they kind of seem to understand it because they have some reference to understand it. I think I've kind of defaulted to not, in general, like my mom always says, like, what are all these things that you do again? And then I have to explain her again, and she's like, I don't know, like, because I do so many different things, right? I've always have, not even now at the same time, but just throughout my life, I've kind of defaulted to not necessarily explaining people what I do, but a way in which I answer that question, people say, hey, you're doing this new thing, right? It's like, what is that? I try to tell them what it means to me. And what it means to me is that I think for one of the things that I've always done is to say yes when something feels right. But I'm a very easy person. A lot of things feel right. So I've said a yes to a lot of things throughout my life, like very different things. Like, oh, that sounds pretty exciting. And I'm easily excitable, I think. So I always say yes. And I always felt that I had a pretty strong internal compass to sort of see, like, not know where it exactly leads me, but know that it leads me in a sort of way that I feel it could bring me somewhere in the next step. And I think when I met you the first time, or maybe in Czech Republic, I told you that I kind of lost that for a bit, that I said yes to so many things, and that none of it made sense together anymore. I was like, I don't know, like, I'm doing this music thing and this AI stuff and podcast and this and that, and everything is kind of fun, but I've lost, okay, maybe I've lost this sort of vision, or maybe I'm at a point in my life where I now want to connect the dots, and they're not, I'm making these drawings and nothing comes out. They're just like blurs, right? And I think that for me, being here part of 5 to Midnight at Tiamat feels like a way where all the dots all of a sudden connect, right? So sort of my facilitator background, even my Sufi background, my interest in the work of like that we've done together, Tiamat, John's work, other people's work, but also all my entrepreneurial background, my number sheets, everything, raising capital for startups, everything sort of feels like, hey, everything has a place here. And so I just said, like, hey, this is just a project where I feel that a lot of things I've been always working towards unknowingly align, and I've always knew it would be something like this, although I would never know that it was this. And I think that lands well with people.
So cool. I'm hearing that as like that you can bring yourself fully to and be like not just accepted, but like appreciated for all these different facets of expertise and interest that you have. Super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I used to explain it theoretically. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And that was hard, actually, because in a lot of ways, like, I felt, especially meeting John's work, right? It's so cool to have a language to explain the things that you're experiencing. Who doesn't want that? It's great, right? But it doesn't land the same for everybody else. And I had to learn that the hard way. That now kind of more the direction that I'm taking is actually a little bit more back-footed. Like, this is why we don't hard sell it very much. I'm not a big social media guy either. And it's funny to say that in the presence of the executive director. But, you know, it's, at least when I try, if I try to answer your question, I don't talk to my friends about it. And you know me, like, you all have been with me to dinners where it's like people ask me, what do you do? And I freeze up. I don't know how to explain that. Because I think what I try and do is less explicit teaching and more implicit. Like, I trust that because I do this work, that it comes through in the way that I show up. And I try my best to show up as true to the practice that I'm trying to embody as possible. And I do think, from what I've seen, that that's probably the most effective. I'm thinking of your siblings, for example, right? It's almost like by osmosis that there is a different kind of lightness. There is a different kind of willingness, and we've been playing D&D over the past couple of days because I'm running a campaign for the siblings, right? And there were a lot of shocks of like, both of them being able to play really well in a very interesting way, which I never would have thought was there. And I think that probably speaks more to the effect of the practice than it does to the precision of the theory. I think when someone practices whatever it is that they practice, and no one thing is better than the other, it comes through in the way in which they embody that. And I try and do that. I try and embody transformative play as much as I can. It's very hard, especially like, now we're in a very busy period and a lot of things are happening where I'm also sick and I'm like, but I think it's in those moments where like, is the practice still keeping me participating in the world? Great. Then to whatever extent can I be that which I'm trying to tell people about rather than tell them about it? It's almost like that old film adage of show, don't tell. Yeah,
that makes sense.
So in Socratic fashion, to flip the question on you, ask your own question.
I'm all ready to go. Like there's the people who it sounds shitty, but like we talk about work, or like if someone politely asks you, oh, what are you doing now? Those are the people who I give the I help to facilitate workshops, and then in the workshops we do this and this, like dime, or we do like some data games, some dialogical exercises, some embodiment, and they're like, oh, okay, interesting. And I say, there's an orientation towards like wisdom, cultivation, and wellness. And they're like, oh, it's like a mental health thing. Okay, great. And then
that's the touchstone.
Yeah. And then with my friends and family, and people who are interested in having deeper discussions, then it's what you said. It's like the way that I show up. I remember a friend recently asked me, because I was just sharing with her some reflections that I had, or discoveries that I had in my relationship with you, based on some of the kind of worries that she was sharing with me with her partner. And she was like, how do you come to realize all these things? Is it in therapy? Like, did you go and talk to some particular person? I was like, no, I just like did Tiamat and some journaling and a lot of conversations with Papa. And I think that answer impacted me more than it impacted her, because she was like, oh, then I just have to come to your workshops, I guess. But I think that's a really good way of like exemplifying what transformation looks like. Because I mean, even for myself, sometimes I find transformation a really like hyperbolic word. Like what actually does it mean? But to feel how it manifests like in my life, and then how that helps me be better in service to like my work, my friends, and my loved ones, my family. That's a whatever more intense version of a touchstone is.
And I think to see people who have transformed, is quite powerful. I remember Rens, after coming back from Tier 2 a couple of years ago, right? You had a chat with Omri, and then Omri texted me right afterwards. Omri is a mutual friend of ours who works on a project with us. And he texted me and was like, I have no idea what happened to Rens, but he feels totally different now. He's so much more open, so much more like he's just sort of like sharing impact of just sort of being with you. in the wake of that. And I think I have the absolute pleasure and privilege of kind of like seeing how all of you have transformed over the time that we've known each other, however long, however short, right, at different degrees. And because I'm a facilitator, I can't help but track that I go like, oh yeah, a year ago, Ricardo from 2 years ago would not be able to sit down with me and have really tense discussion about this thing and come to a middle way. We probably just sort of, call it a night and say we'll think about it later. But now I really see you with the stamina for ambiguity, to really sit down and go, hang on, actually, why do you care about it? To change your stance on something, which helps me to do that too. Yeah. So, on the back of that, I think you're right. That was a very lovely question to end on. Next week, we have workshops happening, actually. So these will be online workshops. I'll be facilitating them. You guys will be, I think some of you are attending for some of that. We'll have to dip in and out because of scheduling, but I'll definitely be there. Do you want to give some details on that, my love?
Yeah, let me get them out. I was not prepared for this.
Yeah. So you can share those. And I think we'll put the sign up link in the show notes as well, so that folks can join. I think we still have space.
Yes.
For yeah.
So each Saturday in January from 8 to 10 our time, so GMT plus 8 to 10. I'm not sure what time it is for CET and EST, but I'll put that in the show notes. We are running 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Great for Central European time. We'll be running a free 2-hour online workshop where two domains of time will be kind of like exercises from 2 domains of time will be overlapping. And time is Rens.
Dialogical, imaginal, meditative, and embodiment practices.
Great.
Nice. But of course, it'll be limited to stuff that we can do online. And then you can sign up for all 4 of them, because it doesn't matter if you repeat a session or 2. We some of the exercises might repeat, but they might be repeated in a different way, combined with different things. So
in a different context, yeah.
Since there are 4, if you have the time, come for all 4 and bring your friends so that you can talk about this cool or weird workshop after coming to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're considering signing up for TMEDX and you've heard us talk a lot, because we have talked a lot, whether with John or without, or having sort of these quadrilogues, and you want to do some practice, by all means, please come. They're also the orientation for them is not so much deep, like serious practice. They're not progressive in that way that you have to do all of them in sequence. You can drop in. And they're really much more for us to meet you, for you to meet other folks, is what we will call more of a connection container. So it's explicitly a bit more social than it is what we will call a training container, which is to pick up and learn the skills, right? Those are when the program starts. Then that takes a slightly different orientation. So just come, have some fun, and meet some folks. And that's kind of what it is. So on the back of that, thank you all, everybody. Thank you, each and every one of you. Thank you, Ricardo. I know you're very busy. Thank you, Rens, for coming down and doing this live with Ricardo, even though you're placed in Vienna.
Cool.
Thank you, Bao, for being the love of my life. Yeah, and then thank me. Thank me. No, not you all. I thank myself for. I'm too sleepy, guys. I ran 2 campaigns back to back. I ran 2 sessions back to back, and I slept late.
Since like half an hour into this.
There you go. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. We will see you. Very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we hope to see you all in the new year. Ciao, everybody. Hey, see you all next week as well. Ciao.
Thanks.
Hey.